What's going on, Packers fans? Aaron Nagler here, Cheesehead TV, talking football with my good friend Andy Herman. Week 1 in the books, Andy, and hey, what do you know? The Bears still suck. Funny how that works.
Oh, we were just talking offline. You'll think maybe Bears fans will learn from this and maybe they won't talk quite as much smack, but they just never learn. This is a really fun one. This is a little bit more. There's just so much smack talk through the course of the offseason that this one just felt really freaking good.
It felt so great. And here's the thing. What's so fun about this game for me, other than getting to dunk on Bears fans, that's always enjoyable,
Right.
but how much there is to look at and kind of dissect and talk about when it comes to the play of not just the team, but the young guys and how much promise and growth potential you can see. Because, like, I think across the board from Jordan Love all the way through the roster, really, other than, say, the really seasoned veterans like Kenny Clark or David Bakhtiari, Aaron Jones, Jair Alexander, like those guys, you know what to expect week in and week out. They're stalwarts. But man, the young guys, again, including Jordan, it's so fun to watch them kind of, I don't want to say flail around, but you definitely got the sense of like, oh, hey, guys, we're playing a football game. Like it was so great because you saw the raw athleticism of a Lucas Van Ness. You saw the real power of a Devontae Wyatt. But, man, they're still just so young and honing their skills while beating down another professional football team. I mean, if you're a Packers fan, I think just the pure football side of it, you've got to be so excited after coming off that game.
Could not agree more. And I'll even actually push back a little bit on some of the veteran stuff because I think there was some question of like, hey, which Rasul Douglas do you get? Which
Rasul's a really good point.
Devondre Campbell do you get? Which Darnell Savage do you get? Like even some of the veterans, you weren't exactly quite sure which version of them you were going to get. I thought Rasul yesterday played a really, really good football game. A lot of what we saw all throughout training camp, that carried over. This looked like 2 years ago, Rasul Douglas. And then to your point, the young players. And I think the biggest thing that pops off is the speed and the athleticism. And, we can always look at the relative athletic scores when Goody drafts everyone or signs somebody. And yes, you have to have a base level of football too. But when you put a whole field of athletes out on the field that are just freaks, this sometimes is what you get. You get guys that are flying around with their hair on fire. And I thought when you get a little bit more passion and intensity, guys rallying to the football with that speed, that athleticism, that's some of the stuff that you can get. So I thought that flew off the page yesterday, both offense, defense, and actually on special we-fence too, Aaron.
The we-fence, yes. Thank you for correcting yourself, so I don't have to. We always start with the offense. Let's start with the defense, and only because you brought up Rasul, who, to your point, I think played not only his best game in probably over a year, but man, his most physical game that I can remember. As like, it's so interesting to talk about that mentality, right? That fly to the ball, all 11 hats to the ball. And that's, somewhat kind of coach speak at times. You really saw it kind of pop off the screen yesterday. And Rasul was a kind of a leader in that regard. He was so physical. And to your point, it kind of was a carryover from what we saw this summer, to the point where I remember that one practice where he was just absolutely laying into the offense, the Packers offense. This was before the Patriots even got to town. Like, he was going off so hard that like Aaron Jones had to start drawing back at him a little bit and saying, hey, we're on the same team, guy. I mean, he brought that intensity to that game throughout. And I just thought that kind of, I don't want to say like they fed off of it because that kind of sounds cliche, but man, you could see how the guys did really rally to the ball in a way I don't think we've seen a whole lot of in Green Bay, especially since Joe Barry's been in town. And the way not only Rasul, but again, Darnell Savage, that's the most physical I've seen him play since Joe Barry's been in town. And you put all that together and you start to see, okay, yes, sometimes you definitely saw still the too high shell, keeping stuff in front of them. That can work if you're rallying to the ball and making the tackle. That's what we saw again and again and again yesterday, and that was so encouraging.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple. I think we would probably agree that this wasn't Rudy Ford's overall best game, but I posted a video on Twitter too
Best
where
game, yeah.
he's coming from deep safety, complete opposite side of the field, and he comes like a missile to the other side, and the running back's getting the ball on the other side. And all of a sudden, Rudy Ford just screams in the screen, and he is just laying that running back out. So to your point, that physicality, that intensity, that rallying to the football, Rudy Ford didn't have to be there. He didn't have to cross all the way to the other side of the field to lay a missile hit on an opposing Bears player, but he did,
Right.
and I'm glad that he did. And I'm sure the Bears player was not happy about it, but it was awesome. It was really, really fun. And I think there was a lot of things that were the complete antithesis of the week 1 game against Minnesota a season ago. The rallying to the football. I thought the communication on the back end of the defense was night and day difference. Not 100% perfect week 1, but man, they handed things off way, way better than they did than that Minnesota game a season ago. I thought even some of the matchups, and yes, they played a lot of zone coverage still, but more often than not, Jair was lined up across from DJ Moore and Rasul Douglas, and that physicality lined up across from Chase Claypool. And yeah, maybe sometimes the Bears could use motion against it and whatever. So be it. At least start in that formation and make them do stuff to counter it. I just thought there was so much that was better 1 year later than what they did in week 1 a season ago. And I think they learned a lot of their lessons.
Could not agree more. It's interesting, though. You talk about the guys on the perimeter who I thought held up really well all game long. It's interesting watching Keyshawn Nixon in that game because this is something we talked about last week as far as he was pretty up and down this summer in that slot role. And I thought you saw a continuation of that yesterday. I thought on the plus side, he's such a willing tackler. He's so physical to keep going along with this physical theme. He is great in that regard. That block that he gets basically goes through Claypool in the attempted block to drop the ball carrier behind the line of scrimmage. There's a tackle of Herbert in the open field where that in the past you're almost counting on that rupturing into a big gain, and he stops it in its tracks. Those are great plays, and that's what you want from your slot. But man, the touchdown he gives up, there's a couple other places where he seems maybe not a step slow, but maybe his eyes are in the wrong spot or he's taking a false step. I just think that's going to be part of the journey with Nixon in the slot this year, because I don't doubt for a moment that the Packers are going to want to live with it because of those physical aspects. But man, I just think the further we get into the season, the more we're probably going to see opposing offensive coordinators start to dial up stuff to try and take advantage of him.
Yeah, and I wonder too if there's not a workaround here, because I love his physicality in the slot. I think he tackles well. He does not lack for confidence. He's up and down a little bit in coverage. There's a couple plays where he plays well. There's a couple other plays like the touchdown, a couple plays in the flat where he's just a step slow to it. Hopefully, maybe that just comes with time and that, maybe he learns from it. But if he doesn't, is there a world in which maybe on some obvious passing downs, maybe do you get Jair inside where you don't have to worry about him quite as much going up against the run? And then maybe a Carrington Valentine, or maybe when Eric Stokes comes back, do you maybe try one of those players on the outside with Jair in the slot just to get your better coverage guys on the field in some clear and obvious passing situations? They used some dime defense the other day or yesterday, and they used Rasul in the slot in those situations. I don't think we want to see a whole helping of that, but I think in little bits and pieces here and there, that's something they could look at as well. So I'm wondering if maybe as time goes on, if that does continue to be an issue, if maybe they can't find some workaround to that. But I do like his intensity, his physicality, his confidence up front. I do think that helps on early downs, and maybe you live a little bit with some of the coverage hiccups here and there. But I do think when you have obvious passing downs, you got to get your best coverage guys on the field. And maybe over time, they try to get a Carrington Valentine or an Eric Stokes on the field in those situations.
And then one of the things that completely jumped off the screen yesterday watching that game, the guys being able to hold it down on the back end in large part because of the pressure up front from the defensive front seven. I mean, whether it was, the pairing of Kenny Clark and Devontae Wyatt is really exciting, especially going back and rewatching it. But the work they did in tandem with the outside backers, very, very, from my I've only rewatched the game once, but not a ton of pressure calls. A lot of 4-man rush, they played some stunts, games, what have you. But man, it was 4 guys doing work, almost down in and down out, and that talk about marrying your coverage and your rush. They did a supreme job of that to the point where it resulted in the pick 6 for Quay Walker. Again, that's a 4-man rush. It wasn't heavy blitzing, but the work those guys did up front was so promising and so exciting.
Yeah, I'm 48 plays in on defense so far, and the only 2 pressures that I can remember are actually the one where they brought the double corners off the edge, Jair,
Yep.
and Jair should have had the sack on Fields, and like tip your cap to Justin Fields a little bit. He made an awesome play on that. And then the other one was the touchdown to what that Keyshawn Nixon gave up. They brought Rudy Ford off the corner on that one. So the pressure actually, when they did bring pressure, at least in the ones that I'm remembering off the top of my head, wasn't super effective. When they stayed home and kind of rushed 4 and let Devontae Wyatt, Lucas Van Ness, Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, like all those guys just kind of cook up front, that's when they had their best success. And I mean, I think the really fun thing, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it on offense too, with who was missing on offense, but Rashawn Gary just playing a smattering of snaps in this game. And even when he was in, he looked really, really good. But I mean, man, you have him for 50 snaps a game playing at that level. That's going to change this defense even for the better as well. So this was a really impressive first step. And just the ability to come in waves with those guys now, and not like, there's a point in time not too long ago when you get Jonathan Garvin and Ladarius Hamilton coming off the edge, and you're just like, all right, we're not going to get pressure off the edge on those plays. And on the interior, if it's no offense to the Tyler Lancasters and those guys of the world, but if those guys come in, you're just not getting interior pressure on those plays. Now you've got guys in Wyatt and Carl Brooks we saw get a sack. Colby Wooden had a great play in the backfield where he immediately penetrated. It was a run stop, but I'm like, oh, that's Devontae Wyatt. I'm like, oh no, that's not Devontae Wyatt. That's Colby Wooden.
I know, right? I had the exact same reaction. Like I remember specifically thinking, "Oh, Wyatt's having a game." Oh, wait, that's Wooden.
That's like, Colby Wooden. I know
the quite a quick step, the quick initial pressure is so key to his game, and it jumps off the screen, no doubt.
It is, and the fact that you can rotate in Enigbare and LVN and Preston and Gary and even a Justin Hollins here and there, like the depth is just so much different than it's been, and all those guys have the ability to penetrate into the backfield.
Well, switching over to the offensive side, we'll stick along the line because, I mean, the offensive line just did the work yesterday. As far as I think I saw PFF, I think had them down for allowing 2 pressures like the entire game.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, look, you say what you want about the Bears, what their front is, etc. I get it all, but man, that's a professional football team, and you kept the quarterback clean all day long. And I don't think it's any mystery. You know, you watch Jordan in the game he had throwing for 245, 3 touchdowns, 123 passer rating or whatever it was. Like that doesn't just happen if he's running for his life or having to drop his eyes and being nervous about the rush. Like he's playing, I don't want to say 7-on-7, but he's being able to operate the offense at a really high level because he knows he's got that protection in front of him. He never seems flustered. And I think it's part of his nature in general. But I also think it's a product of playing behind those guys and knowing, they've got this on lockdown in front of me.
Yeah, don't certainly never take it for granted. Go watch the Bengals against the Browns yesterday. Go watch the Giants against the Cowboys. Those defensive fronts just annihilated those offensive line. There's some very poor offensive line play throughout the league, and Green Bay showed off that they've got 5 good starters when it comes to pass protection. Run blocking hit and miss from time to time, but I thought from a pass pro standpoint, they were phenomenal. They got depth there too. They brought Rasheed Walker in as a 6th offensive lineman / whatever you want to call him.
Dude, on that throwback screen, Rasheed Walker is on his horse, looking for someone to block, and he never gets to. But but he doesn't touch anyone. But like the fact that he's hauling ass like 40, almost 50 yards downfield, looking for someone to block. I love that play.
I do too. I love that player too. He's been nothing but impressive all off season long and even going into this game. So yeah, I think the offensive line play that was my biggest thing that I've been on all off season long is if there was one thing that gave me a ton of confidence, you go back to the first half of last year when Bakhtiari misses a first couple games and then it takes him a couple games to kind of get back in the swing. Then he goes out with the appendectomy. You don't get a ton of Bakhtiari. And then Elton Jenkins, he misses a couple games. You put him at right tackle. He really struggles at right tackle. And I think some of it's just the rust coming off the ACL. They move him back at left guard, plays 1 game there, then misses a game. And then after that, they keep him at left guard and he looks like Elton Jenkins after that. But basically half a season is gone by that point. I thought John Runyon Jr. had a little bit of a down year last year. Myers didn't play great last year. And then Zach Tom, you saw towards the end of the year being like, okay, this is going to probably be a player. And he's taken a significant step. I thought he was the best player on offense in this game. And that's saying something. But if this offense, the offensive line, took the step that I thought they could, that was my biggest hope. And that I thought that this team could potentially take a major step from last year. And this was hopefully a really good sign of what's going to come for this offensive line.
It's interesting. I'm really glad you brought up the run blocking. The idea that, I said in my post-game chat, like the pass blocking was lights out. I loved it.
Yep.
It was fascinating to me to see all of the instant reactions online about AJ Dillon, because I had so many people in our chat on the watch party and so many people in my post-game chat, and then even in my mentions on Twitter, like AJ like runs the gamut because it's the internet. I understand, but like, oh, he's a bust. They got to find a different second back, and I'm like, go back and watch that game again and watch AJ's carries specifically. Yes, are there some like no gain, 1 yard gain, whatever? There are plenty of plays there where I think AJ makes something out of nothing in regards to guys being shoved back into the backfield on just right off the initial snap. There's plenty of plays where he's powering through and making some decent yardage in the red zone. Like, I understand it's frustrating. He's not Aaron Jones, but man, he can only work with what he's got in front of him. And there was so much inconsistency with the run blocking yesterday.
Yeah.
I just need people to like take a breath on AJ Dillon a little bit.
There's so many things I want to say here. First of all, the first thing that I think he deserves a ton of credit for, he was awesome in pass pro again. He had a couple really nice blitz pickups. Like he's just very consistent in that regard, which is not nothing. Secondly, he might have had one of the plays of the game when he just hung on to the football on that one play where it just gets annihilated in the first, like he gets the ball and all of a sudden there's a dude right on him.
Right.
Like if he fumbles there, that's maybe a totally different ball game. Just holding on to that in and of itself was worthy of praise. And then to your point, like you go back and you watch, I think he got a little bit unlucky with the carries that he got where it just wasn't blocked up quite as well. And then the last thing, you hit the nail on the head of like, yeah, he's not Aaron Jones. Very few people are. Aaron Jones is a phenomenal running back. And one of the things that's going against Dillon the most is that he's like compared to the guy that's in front of him that's just doing dynamic stuff every single time he gets his hands on the football. So yeah, I think there is some of that. I do think, AJ is who he is. He's never going to be the dynamic guy. He's not going to make a ton of people miss. But if you get him blocked up a little bit, and he, to your point, he made a couple plays. He did make a couple guys miss in the backfield, or at least run through some players where that could have been -2-3 yards, and he got 1 yard out of it. And all you see is one carry, 1 yard, and it doesn't look super sexy. But if he added a +4 yards to what that should have been, there's still value in that as well. So I'm with you. I get it, and I still think there's probably something to maybe Dillon would have maybe you would have liked some of those carries back to get a little bit more out of it. But this, I'll put it this way. This is not Royce Newman. This is not like somebody that's out there where you're just like, oh my God, this guy is potentially losing us the game.
Yeah.
This is a fine player that just looks worse in comparison to the player who's in front of him.
Well, and I think the obvious reason this happens is, and me, it's the idea of draft stock, right? It is inescapable. So when people, remember that he was a second round pick and where the Packers were when they took him, that is inescapable in in a lot of people's minds. And then you turn around and you look at Aaron Jones, where was he picked? And it's this crystallizes my point about the draft. It's like, I don't care about any of that once they're on the football field. Yeah. And like AJ is a good football player. Aaron Jones is a historically great player, and to compare the two and to bemoan the fact that AJ isn't Aaron drives me insane. But that's always going to be the prism that they're viewed through. And
you got to look at the draft as a whole always, because how many times in the history of the Packers has the best player been the first player that they selected from the draft class? It's very, very rare.
Ron Wolf had a ton of I'm not going to say full on misses, but a lot of not great picks in the first round, and he killed it in the middle later in the draft. Yeah.
If you can get a handful of picks, ideally one, star, a couple starters and a rotational player out of draft. It doesn't matter where you get them. You just got to find them in some capacity. By the way, since I'm throwing Royce Newman under the bus, had 5 snaps in that game. Looked really good in those 5 snaps.
There you go. Hey, Royce Newman, stepping up. But speaking of stepping up, how about those young pass catchers? I mean, going into this game, you're online, you're on YouTube every day. I mean, I know my comment section, I'm sure yours as well. Holy cow, are Packers fans, some section of Packers fans, beyond nervous for the fact that Christian Watson wasn't going to play and Romeo Doubs was limited. It's like, how many times does Matt LaFleur have to put together a game plan where he utilizes all of the pieces on offer to kind of make up for it in the aggregate, so to speak, before Packers fans have a little faith. And I understand, again, it's one game. I get it. But, man, these guys are pretty good at what they do. And I thought, given the fact that, Romeo was on somewhat of a pitch count, and you had a bunch of young guys, second year and first year, operating at a really high level in a pretty complicated offense. I mean, you can't come away from that game and not be excited about all that's on offer and all that's ahead of the guys who are tasked with catching footballs week after week from Jordan Love.
Yeah, no world would I expected, Dontavian Wicks to get the most snaps of any wide receiver in this game. And it's probably the only game that's going to hopefully happen all season long if everyone remains, healthy moving forward. But, we talked about it earlier with Rashawn Gary not playing the entirety of the game and on a snap count. We saw Romeo Doubs a little bit on a snap count, and then Christian Watson doesn't even play. And you still see some of the explosiveness on this offense. And they didn't even hit on all the plays that were available to them. Obviously the big one down the field to Luke Musgrave, where Musgrave and Love just not on the same page. I thought there were a couple opportunities to Jaden Reed down the field too. There was 2 third downs, if I remember correctly, where Love and Reed just kind of couldn't connect. I would have liked to see Reed come back to the ball on one. I guarantee you he'll do that moving forward. Like, there was still some meat left on that bone that I think they can still go out and get. And that's with, again, Romeo Doubs on a pitch count. Aaron Jones only playing half the game, A, due to injury, and B, because they forgot about him again for a little bit. And then, obviously Christian Watson, like, they're going to have a very fun offense full of playmakers. And we talked about it at the onset on all 3 phases. But once again, we saw the speed on display. Luke Musgrave being able to get down the field, Jaden Reed being able to get down the field. And then you see some of the skill come through too with Romeo Doubs and the way that he was able to separate on some of those plays. So just a fun offense that I think is going to continue to evolve through the course of the year.
Looking ahead to the Atlanta game, I haven't had a chance to watch their matchup yet, but just reading about it a little bit, sure seems like the Packers, I'm not going to say catching them at a good time or anything like that, but I like that they're playing this team, the Falcons, early in the year. Yeah. I do think it's tough. Another road game, 2 road games right out of the gate. And obviously their first round pick, the running back, is a problem. I mean, you don't have to watch the game. You can just look at the highlights to see his capability and know that that's going to be a focus. But I like the Packers having to kind of be road warriors for the first couple weeks because they are so young, to get them acclimated, so to speak. And then, again, the Falcons, a team in transition, I think is fair. And I think the Packers, I can't speak to how they match up, but I like the idea of a young athletic team like the Packers certainly showed they are yesterday, being able to go into Atlanta and hopefully continue to improve and build on the things we saw yesterday that maybe were a little ragtag at times, but hopefully they can utilize this as a springboard to, okay, these are the issues we know we have to work on and focus on, and Atlanta provides them that opportunity.
Yeah, and I think the big one that they're going to take away, I'm sure, is some of the missed tackles. And Bijan Robinson will make you pay for those missed tackles if you do them. You saw some of the elusiveness that Justin Fields has. Now imagine that even to a degree higher with Bijan Robinson, and he's getting the ball 25 times a game. It's going to be an issue. And the kid from BYU, is it Algier or what? Tyler Algier or whatever. I don't know how you say his last name, but he's a heck of a running back too. You adding Kyle Pitts at tight end, they're going to have some players on offense that if you're not sound, if you're not rallying to the football, if you're not again, sound with your tackling, they will make you pay for it. And I think this is the really fun thing about this Packers team is this is such now a real test, is to see, can you do it week to week? Because I don't think anyone's expecting Atlanta to make this major run this upcoming year, but it's still a road game. You don't want to get too high from the Bears win that you just had. Can you keep things steady? And like you said, grow from one week to the next. And if they can do that, I like their opportunity to be 2-0. If they can't do that and they take that step back, then they have to, sort of learn from that too. But I think this is a really, really interesting matchup and another really cool litmus test for really both the Falcons and the Packers.
Absolutely. Andy, can't thank you enough. Love talking ball with you each and every Monday, days after the Packers games, whenever they happen. Thank you so much, man. I hope everyone, if you're out there, you're listening, you're watching, make sure you check out Pack-A-Day Podcast, itsthebomb.com, and all of Andy's work, wherever you find him online. Andy, thank you so much, man.
Appreciate it. Enjoy your Victory Monday.